Federal Train Plus Protect 45 ACP versus 357 Magnum. So this is an interesting ammo line. I've tested some of this in the past, and basically what it is, it's an ammo that uses an economical hollow point that's supposed to work well for defense, but also be cheap enough that you can get them in 50-round boxes and practice with that same ammo that you're going to carry. And that actually makes a lot of sense. That makes more sense than the old Winchester train and defense, simply because, you know, there's different bullet shapes that could change how the bullets feed, or it could be different power levels, and that could change the accuracy and all that. But something like this makes a lot more sense to just get an economical bullet that you can practice with if it does indeed perform well for self-defense, and that's what we're going to test today. So our 45 ACP is a 230 grain VHP. What that just means is versatile hollow point, good for target practice or defense. And the 230 grain is rated at 850 feet per second. That's a pretty standard velocity rating. Our 357 Magnum is a 125 grain VHP. It's actually a semi-jacketed hollow point, very similar to their 357B, I believe it is. And that is rated at 1440 feet per second. So I'm going to use my 5.3-inch Glock 41 to test the 45 ACP, and my 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson 686 to test the 357 Magnum. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics gel to see what the best potential of those are. I do that because with ammo, especially like this 45 ACP, we might not actually get any expansion when I go up into doing like fabric and all of that. So I want to at least see in plain gel how well those will do like that. And then I'm going to do my real world simulation test. I'm going to have 4 layers of sweatshirt material on this first 3-inch piece that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4-inch medium density fiber board to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4-inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. In that format, that's about a half representation of the density of flesh. So if we were going to get 16 inches in this gel with the rib simulation in there, that'd be more like 8 inches in a real living target. So we'll do our plain gel shot to get our best potential for expansion. Then we'll do our real world simulation with the fabric and the rib simulation in there. And then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 45 ACP 230 grain VHP. This is rated at 850 feet per second, so a pretty standard velocity rating. I believe they'd use a 5-inch barrel to get that rating. So let's see what we get here with our 45 ACP. .883, 882, 864, 867, 868. So pretty consistent velocity and a little bit above that rate of velocity. Now our 357 Magnum 125 grain semi-jacketed hollow point. This is rated at 1440 feet per second. I do believe that is through a 4-inch barrel. Let's see what I get here in my 4-inch barrel. 1471. 1424, 1455, 1469, 1472. So Federal has upped their game because I have tested this in the past. It wasn't loaded quite right, so they've made it right. So this is a full power 357. This is one of my favorite types of loads. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, first up, we'll do our plain clear ballistics gel shot. So this is just going to the plain clear ballistics, no fabric, anything like that. This will give us our best potential to get expansion and penetration. So let's see what we get here with our 45 ACP. All right. I'll set that with our 357 Magnum. Let's go take a look. All right, so I kind of knew that was going to happen with that 357. Honestly, though, I thought it wouldn't penetrate as far as it actually did. A lot of times those rounds will fragment out really right away, and then they won't penetrate very far. But this is some good performance. This is exactly the type of load that has, you know, a 96% one-shot stop on those old charts. So very potent round. With our 45, we're just tearing through, and then it did expand once we hit in the main block, which I can see up there. Not great expansion, I don't think, but it looks like at least it expanded. With 357, you can see we massively energy dumped right there. And that's part of the secret to its quote-unquote stopping power. It hits really hard and dumps a lot of energy. So with our 45 ACP, there is a very big track, so it is expanding pretty well. And what we got there is about 16 3/4 inches of penetration. So we penetrated real deep without it really over penetrating. Our 357 though, we have a whole bunch of energy dump, fragmentation throughout this channel. So the bullet is going to be quite a bit smaller than what it would have been if it didn't fragment. And what we got there is about 16 inches of penetration. So both of those are actually performing really well. However, that 357 Magnum is probably going to be a little bit more effective. So let's put in our rib simulation, put on our fabric, and see how these do in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of sweatshirt material followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. You gotta remember, when I say 3 inch pectoral, that's like a half representation of the density, so it's really like 1.5 inches actual flesh. So ideally, I like to keep these bullets within that back rib simulation without them passing through while still hitting at least 12 inches of penetration. This is usually where rounds like this 45 will start to fail, where they won't expand it and they'll penetrate through that back rib simulation. I suspect that's probably what's going to happen here, but hopefully I'll be pleasantly surprised. So 45 ACP real world simulation. See how this does. All right. Now let's hit that with our 357 Magnum. Let's go take a look. All right, every time I touch off one of those 357s, even with this hearing protection on, I hear a ringing. I don't hear that with the 45, so that's something that could matter. And looking at our rib simulation, yeah, we just poked a hole with our 45 ACP because it's failing to expand. With our 357 Magnum, it's fragmenting out, and it's already losing some of those pieces before it even hits this. So it's just hitting really hard. And as unimpressive as it sounds to lose pieces like that, it's actually a positive thing historically, because it's always had good quote-unquote stopping power. Now our 45, I can just about guarantee it tumbled through that back rib simulation. Yeah, see a keyhole through there. That's pretty typical. So this is pretty typical for rounds like this. You know, that's why I did the plain gel shot. I wanted to see show at least what the company wants their ammo to look like. But when we test it how it really would perform, we see it doesn't perform all that well. And right here with the 45, that's tumbling damage. We can see that right here at about the 10-inch mark to about the 15-inch mark, it was tumbling right here, because we have a bubbly mark that's pretty typical for clear ballistics for it to look like that. So our 45 ACP, we went through 2 rib simulations and we're at about 21 inches of penetration. Now, I think that would still stop within an average size individual. It's been my calculations that if you go about 3 inches past that back rib simulation, so going past 22 inches, it would possibly pass right through. But yeah, being only at like 21, it's probably okay. And it's still a 45, so it's going to do a lot of damage. Now with that 357 Magnum, there's no question. This is just a better performance. The track that I see entering right there, I've never seen a 9mm plus P plus even look that big. So this is just outperforming basically everything out there. It's just that being old school, it will fragment a little bit, but still just a massive amount of energy dump. And we went to about 15 inches of penetration. So yeah, that fits right in historically with that 96% one-shot stop round that Federal already has made for a long time. So this is just a repackaged that. So the value you're getting with that 357 is pretty darn good to get a 50 round box of that. That's pretty good performance, as where our 45 is pretty meh. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at these bullets. Then I'll shoot our steel target and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. Here's our 357 Magnum and our 45 ACP. So there's not much of that left of that 357, as where that 45 actually expanded out quite big. And a lot of people will look at this and be like, well, look at that 45. Obviously that did better. But what you don't realize and you don't see is it's likely this expanded much larger than this at one point and then just pretty much exploded. So all that damage is actually left in there by fragmentation. You can see some of it here. So those look okay, but for a 45, that's kind of inconsistent performance. This looks kind of cheap to me. As where the old school, 357, that's still a pretty good load. And then going through our real world simulation, our 357 actually is larger looking now because it stuck together a little bit better. After going through that fabric, it lowers that expansion threshold or increases it or whatever, and it makes it so it doesn't explode so much. So you got pretty good performance. As where when we look at our 45 here, and again, you might say, well, that 45 isn't much smaller, and that's true. I mean, it's going to cause a lot of damage just being that big, but realistically, it's not going to be anywhere close to how effective that 357 is going to be. So our 357 performed pretty good and predictably, as where our 45 is just not consistent from shot to shot. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, our practical shootability drill. I had to put a glove on here because this 357 Magnum is so powerful that I'm getting just a little bit of blast coming back and hitting my thumb, which causes me to flinch a little bit. Wouldn't really affect me in a real self-defense situation because I probably would not be thinking about that. But out here on the range, I'm going to think about that. So I want to eliminate that just so I can shoot a little bit better. So 45 ACP, 14 yards. Let's see how this stuff shoots for me. All right, I'm just getting a quick front sight picture and popping them off, and they shoot pretty good. 357. That stuff hits really hard. Case ejection's fine with those. Let me back it up. People have said I haven't backed up for a while and shot from any real distance, so they've been wanting to see that. So let me back it up and shoot from some distance and see how these things shoot. All right, 75 yards from the target just for fun at this point. I haven't come back this far in probably a month or a month and a half or something. It's been a while. One thing I like about 45 ACP is being a 230 grain bullet and a hollow point. A hollow nose will actually stabilize the bullet a little bit, kind of like a football spinning a little bit better, just because when you put the weight towards the back, it sounds backwards, but when you put more of the weight towards the back, it actually is more accurate. So having the momentum of a 230 grain with a hollow point generally makes it pretty accurate. So I'm curious to what we'll see with this. So 75 yards, 45 ACP. Let's see how I can do with this. Thought I missed. It took that long. All right, So I missed 3 times. The one time I overthought it and I missed, and the 2 other times I actually felt myself jerk the trigger and flinch a little bit. So the ammo itself is pretty darn accurate. 357 Magnum. Let me touch one off single action. See how this shoots from this distance. That hits fast. I think I hit it. Oh, it's hard to tell with these. I think I'm hitting. Surprised I hit that last one. I jerked the trigger big time on that last one. So with that, it was hard for me to tell where if they were hitting or not. So it's like, did I hit? Do I need to adjust? And I would hear it again. I think, no, I missed because I didn't hear any steel. But then I see the thing wobbling around. It's like, well, I did hit it. So at that point, I'm just kind of launching them. So looking at this ammo, overall, it's a pretty good value for the ammo. With the 45 ACP, it's kind of, this is one of those things where it's a little bit better than a full metal jacket, but not by a lot when you're talking a real world simulation there. So I would think if you get that ammo cheap enough, it's probably a pretty good value. And yes, if you're going to use it for self-defense, it would work a little bit better than a full metal jacket, but it's not great overall. As where this 357 Magnum, this is full house 357 Magnum. This is the old school stuff. This is the stuff that you know the data on. One shot stop type of deal going on. And a lot of people, I've had people tell me, don't you realize that's made up, that's fake? And I know where they're coming from with that, because you can't 100% rely on something and be like, well, it's got a one shot stop of 96%, therefore whatever. But historically, all the data piled together, there are some things that stand out that are a little bit different, that seem to consistently do the same thing. And I've talked to a lot of old cops, and they all say the same thing. I've seen a modern day shooting on video with the 357 SIG that's basically the Ballistic twin. That matches all the stories that I'm hearing from these old cops. So I think there is something to that. So the fact that you can buy something that good in a 50 round box like this, I think that's a fantastic value. I would use it. I would use it for self-defense in a heartbeat. It's very good stuff. As we're at the 45, if you're going to be serious about defense with the 45, I would pick something different than this. So interesting test. That's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.